Hello, dear friend. Welcome to this quiet space, this peaceful place of rest. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Let yourself settle in now, deeply, gently. Pull the blankets close around you and feel the weight of the day beginning to lift away. Tonight, we're going to walk together through an ancient story, a story of courage and kindness, of faith so deep and gentle that it moved the heart of heaven itself. This is the story of Daniel, a man who prayed by an open window, who trusted when trust seemed impossible, who rested in the presence of God even in the darkest hour. There's no hurry here, no rush, just gentle words floating through the quiet darkness, like leaves drifting down a still stream. Let your breathing slow and soften. Let your shoulders drop. Let peace wash over you like moonlight. Outside your window, perhaps the world is sleeping too. The stars are keeping watch. The night is calm and safe. And here, in this moment, you are held, you are safe, you are deeply loved. Our story begins long ago, in a time when empires rose like mountains and fell like rain. But this isn't a story of empires, really. It's a story of one faithful heart, one gentle soul, one man who knew that the greatest strength is not in power or pride, but in prayer, in peace, in trust. So breathe deeply now. Let your eyes grow heavy, and let us walk together back through time to the ancient city of Babylon, where lamplight glows golden in palace windows, and a quiet man kneels in prayer as the sun sets over the desert. Long ago, when the world was younger and the prophets still walked among the people, there was a boy named Daniel. He grew up in the land of Judah, in the green hills where olive trees grew silver in the sunlight and where the temple stood gleaming with promise. Daniel's childhood was filled with gentle things, his mother's voice teaching him the ancient prayers, his father's hands showing him how to write the sacred words, the smell of bread baking in the clay ovens, the sound of psalms drifting through evening air. He learned early to love the quiet morning hours, when dew covered the grass like scattered diamonds, when the world felt new and tender. He would sit beneath the fig tree in his family's courtyard and whisper the words his grandfather had taught him. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." These were peaceful days, days of learning and laughter, days when faith felt as natural as breathing. Young Daniel would watch the sunrise and know somehow that God was near, as close as the warmth on his face, as certain as the ground beneath his feet. But the world changes, doesn't it? Sometimes gently, like seasons turning. Sometimes suddenly, like a storm that comes without warning. And for Daniel, change came with the sound of distant thunder, the rumble of armies approaching from the east. The great empire of Babylon, mighty and vast, stretched out its hand toward the small nation of Judah. King Nebuchadnezzar, powerful as he was, wanted not just land, but the brightest minds, the strongest youth, the most promising students from every nation he conquered. And so Daniel, still young, still tender-hearted, found himself walking a long road eastward, not in chains, not in cruelty, but with other young men of noble birth, chosen to be trained in the ways of Babylon, chosen to serve in the palace of a foreign king. Can you imagine how his heart must have felt, leaving behind the hills he knew, the family he loved, the temple where he had prayed since childhood, walking toward an unknown city beneath unfamiliar stars? But Daniel carried something with him, something no one could take away. He carried his faith like a quiet lamp burning in his chest. He carried the prayers his mother taught him. He carried the promises of God whispered in Hebrew, precious and true. The journey was long. Days blended into weeks. The landscape changed from green hills to flat plains to the great Euphrates River flowing wide and blue. And finally, rising from the horizon like a dream made of stone, the city of Babylon appeared. Oh, what a city it was! Walls so thick that chariots could race along the top. Gates covered in blue glazed tiles, decorated with golden lions and dragons. Gardens hanging in terraces, green and lush, defying the desert around them. And everywhere, the sound of languages blending together, merchants calling, children playing, the great beating heart of an empire. Daniel was taken to the palace, a place of marble columns and cool courtyards, of fountains splashing softly in the shade. Here, he and the other young men would study. They would learn the language of the Chaldeans, the wisdom of the Babylonian scholars, the literature and science of this ancient civilization. It would have been easy to lose himself here, easy to forget the prayers of his childhood, easy to become someone else entirely, molded by the empire's hands. But Daniel remembered who he was. Every morning before the sun rose, he would wake quietly and find a corner where he could pray. Sometimes in a courtyard where the stars still shone, sometimes by a window where the first gray light of dawn crept in. He would kneel, close his eyes, and speak to God in the language of his fathers. The training was intense, but Daniel was gentle with himself and kind to others. When faced with rich foods and strong wine from the king's table, he asked politely if he might eat simpler fare, vegetables and water. Not from judgment or pride, but from a desire to honor the traditions he had been taught, to stay connected to who he truly was. The palace steward was worried at first. "You'll grow weak," he said. "You'll look pale compared to the others." But Daniel smiled gently. "Let us try for 10 days, he said, "and then see." So they agreed, and after 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier, stronger, more vibrant than those who ate the rich palace food. Their eyes were clear, their minds were sharp. Grace seemed to rest on them like morning light. God was with them, you see, not in some dramatic, thunderous way, but in the quiet gifts that came each day. The gift of health, the gift of wisdom, the gift of understanding. Daniel studied the stars and learned their patterns. He studied languages and could speak with wisdom to scholars from distant lands. He studied dreams and their meanings, and God gave him insight that went deeper than knowledge, insight that touched the very heart of things. 3 years passed this way. 3 years of learning and growing, of staying faithful in a foreign land, of keeping that quiet lamp burning in his heart. And when the training was complete, when King Nebuchadnezzar tested all the young men, asking them questions of wisdom and understanding, Daniel and his 3 friends stood out like stars in the darkness. The king found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom, not because they were cleverer or more ambitious, but because they had remained true, because they had stayed connected to something deeper than themselves, because wisdom flowed through them like water through an open channel. And so, Daniel began his service in the palace, a young man still, but with an old soul, a soul that prayed each morning, a soul that trusted even when the future was uncertain, a soul that knew somehow that he was exactly where he needed to be. Years passed like chapters in a long, unfolding story. Kings rose and fell, empires shifted like sand, but through it all, Daniel remained, steady as a tree planted by streams of water. He served faithfully, this gentle man with the prophet's heart. He interpreted dreams when no one else could, not with magic or trickery, but with wisdom given from above. He gave counsel to kings, speaking truth softly but clearly, never flattering, never fearing, simply being honest with grace. Daniel's quarters in the palace became a sanctuary. 3 times a day he would stop whatever he was doing and turn toward Jerusalem, toward home, toward the temple that lived now only in his memory. And there, by his window, he would kneel and pray. The morning prayers came with the sunrise. As golden light spilled across the rooftops of Babylon, Daniel would give thanks for the new day. He would ask for wisdom to serve well. He would pray for the people he loved, scattered now across the empire. And he would rest in the presence of God, letting that presence fill him like breath-filling lungs. The afternoon prayers came in the heat of the day, when the work was pressing and the palace was busy with 1,000 urgent tasks. Daniel would slip away to his room, close the door, and kneel again. Just for a few moments, just long enough to remember what was most important, to recenter himself in what was true. And the evening prayers came as shadows lengthened and the day grew cool. This was Daniel's favorite time. The city would settle into a gentler rhythm. Lamps would begin to glow in windows across Babylon. And Daniel would kneel one more time, giving thanks for all that had been, asking for peace through the night ahead. His window faced west, toward Jerusalem, toward everything he had lost and everything he still loved. Sometimes, as he prayed, he could almost see it: the hills of home, the faces of family, the temple where God's presence dwelt. And tears would slide quietly down his cheeks, tears of longing and love, tears that watered the garden of his faith. But these weren't bitter tears. They were tears of connection, tears that kept his heart soft, tears that reminded him he was human, tender, capable of deep feeling. In the palace, everyone knew Daniel's ways. They knew that 3 times a day he would pray. They knew that his word was trustworthy, his counsel wise, his presence calming. If Daniel said something would happen, it happened. If Daniel advised against something, it was wise to listen. He wasn't perfect, of course. He would have been the first to say so. But he was faithful. He was consistent. He was the same person in private as he was in public, the same person with servants as with kings, the same gentle, truthful soul in every season. King Nebuchadnezzar trusted him. When that great king went mad for a time, losing his reason and wandering like a beast in the fields, it was Daniel who had warned him with compassion. And when the king returned to his senses, humbled and changed, it was Daniel he remembered with gratitude. After Nebuchadnezzar came other kings. The empire changed hands. Babylon fell to the Medes and Persians. And still, Daniel remained, now an old man with silver hair and eyes that had seen so much. The new king was named Darius. He was a Persian, a man of different customs and different gods, but he saw in Daniel something rare and precious: wisdom without ambition, integrity without pride, service without agenda. So King Darius placed Daniel in a position of high authority. He made him one of 3 administrators over the entire kingdom, with 120 satraps serving under him. It was a tremendous responsibility, overseeing an empire that stretched from India to Ethiopia, from the mountains to the sea. And Daniel, now elderly but still faithful, served with the same gentle excellence he had always shown. He rose early to pray. He worked diligently through the day. He treated everyone with respect, from the lowest servant to the highest official. And he retired each night with a clear conscience, knowing he had done his best. The other officials noticed this. They saw how the king favored Daniel. They saw how Daniel's wisdom was sought above all others. And in their hearts, jealousy began to grow like a weed in a garden. They wanted to find fault with him. They watched him carefully, looking for mistakes, for corruption, for anything they could use to bring him down. They examined his accounts, his decisions, his interactions. They looked for bribes taken, for favors granted unfairly, for any crack in his character. But they found nothing, nothing at all. Daniel was faithful in everything. His accounts were perfect. His decisions were just. His hands were clean. Can you imagine that? A lifetime of service, and no one could find a single legitimate complaint against him. Not because he was perfect, but because he was faithful. Because he walked each day with integrity, doing the next right thing, trusting God with the results. The jealous officials gathered in small groups, whispering in corners of the palace. "We'll never find any grounds for complaint against this Daniel," they said to one another, "unless we find something in connection with his religion." And so they began to form a plan that would use Daniel's faithfulness against him, a plan that would force him to choose between his God and his king. But Daniel, praying by his window as the sun set over Babylon, knew nothing of this yet. He simply knelt in the gathering darkness, gave thanks for another day, and entrusted himself to the God who had been faithful through all the years of his long life. The evening star appeared in the purple sky. A cool breeze stirred the curtains, and Daniel's voice, soft and sure, rose in the ancient words of prayer his mother had taught him so many years ago. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." In the palace of King Darius, there were many rooms where decisions were made. Grand throne rooms with soaring ceilings, council chambers with maps spread across tables. But some of the most dangerous decisions were made in smaller spaces, in dim corridors where a few men could whisper without being overheard, in gardens where words could be hidden beneath the sound of fountains. The officials who envied Daniel met in such places. There were perhaps 30 or 40 of them, men of influence and ambition, men who felt they deserved the favor Daniel received, men whose pride had grown sharp as thorns. "The king thinks to set him over the entire kingdom," one of them said, his voice tight with frustration. "An old man, a foreigner, someone who still clings to the God of a conquered nation." "He's too perfect," another muttered, "too clean, too faithful. It's unnatural." They spoke in circles for a while, venting their jealousy like steam escaping from a covered pot. But eventually, one of them, a man with a calculating mind, spoke the thought they had all been dancing around. "His prayers," he said quietly. "He prays 3 times a day, every day, without fail. He kneels before his God no matter what else is happening. Even if the palace were on fire, I believe Daniel would stop to pray." The others leaned in, interested now. "What if," the man continued, "we could make that prayer illegal? What if we could convince the king to sign a decree that for 30 days no one could pray to any god or man except King Darius himself? Anyone who violated this decree would be thrown into the lion's den." A murmur went through the group. It was clever, they had to admit, deviously clever. The king would likely agree, thinking it a way to unify the kingdom, to solidify his authority. 30 days wasn't long. Most people could refrain from prayer for 30 days, or at least pray in secret, in hiding. But not Daniel. Daniel would never hide his prayers. Daniel would never compromise his faithfulness, not even for 30 days, not even to save his life. He was too Daniel, too consistent, too devoted. And so the trap was set, with words as its teeth. The next morning, the officials came to King Darius in a large group, their faces arranged in expressions of concern and loyalty. They bowed low, speaking with practiced deference. "O King Darius, live forever," they began. "All the royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce a decree. For 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den." They were lying, of course. Not all the royal administrators had agreed. Daniel certainly hadn't been consulted, but they spoke with such confidence, such unity, that the king had no reason to doubt them. "This will show the strength of your reign," they continued smoothly. "It will demonstrate that your authority comes first, above all other loyalties, and it's only for 30 days, a temporary measure to unify your kingdom." King Darius, sitting on his throne with the morning light streaming through high windows, considered this. He was not a cruel man, not a foolish man, but he was new to this kingdom, and he wanted to establish his authority firmly. The suggestion appealed to his pride, to that part of every human heart that wants to be seen, to be honored, to be placed above others. "Very well," he said, nodding slowly. "Let it be written and signed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." And so it was done. The decree was written on parchment, sealed with the king's ring, and proclaimed throughout Babylon. For 30 days, all prayer was to be directed to the king alone. Any violation would result in death by lions. The officials left the throne room with satisfied smiles, hidden behind respectful faces. The trap was set. Now, they simply had to wait for Daniel to step into it. They didn't have to wait long. Daniel heard about the decree, of course. News traveled quickly through the palace, carried on the lips of servants and scribes. By midday, everyone knew. For 30 days, prayer to any god except King Darius was forbidden. Daniel was in his chambers when a young servant, loyal and kind, brought him the news. The boy's face was worried. "Master Daniel," he said softly, "have you heard about the new law?" I have, Daniel replied, his voice calm. What will you do? The servant asked, his eyes wide with concern. Daniel smiled gently. He placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. I will do what I have always done, he said. I will pray to the God of heaven who has been faithful to me all my life. But the lion's den, the servant whispered. I know, Daniel said, and I'm grateful for your concern. But some things, dear friend, are more important than safety. Some things are worth dying for. And prayer, communion with God, that is one of those things. The servant left reluctantly, casting worried glances back at Daniel. And Daniel, left alone in his chambers, knelt by his window as he had done every day for decades. The window was open, as it always was. The afternoon sun streamed in, warm and golden. In the distance, beyond the walls of Babylon, the desert stretched toward the west, toward Jerusalem, toward home. And Daniel, his knees pressing into the familiar stone floor, began to pray. He didn't hide. He didn't whisper. He didn't close his window or draw his curtains. He prayed as he had always prayed, with his voice soft but audible, with his hands raised, with his heart open to heaven. My God, he said, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the breath in my lungs, for the light that fills this room, for the years you have given me to serve in this place. I pray for King Darius, that you would give him wisdom. I pray for this kingdom, that peace would dwell here. I pray for my people, scattered and far from home, that you would remember your promises to them. He prayed for a long time. And as he prayed, in the street below, some of the jealous officials had gathered. They had positioned themselves where they could see Daniel's window. And now they watched, their plan coming to fruition as Daniel knelt in plain sight and prayed to his God. They smiled at each other. It was done. Daniel had violated the decree. Now all that remained was to inform the king. Daniel, finishing his prayer, opened his eyes and saw the afternoon sun slanting long across his floor. He felt peace in his chest, deep and sure, like an anchor holding steady in a storm. He didn't regret his choice. He didn't wish he had hidden or compromised. He had done what was right, and now he would face whatever came with the same trust that had carried him through so many years. That evening, as the sun began to set, Daniel prayed again. And again, the officials watched. And again, they noted it carefully. The next morning before dawn, Daniel rose and prayed once more. The stars were still visible in the dark blue sky. The city was quiet, and Daniel's voice rose in the familiar words. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? 3 times that first day. 3 times the second day. 3 times the third. Daniel never varied, never hid, never compromised. He prayed openly, faithfully, as he had always done. The officials waited a few days, gathering witnesses, making sure their case was ironclad. And then, on the 4th or 5th day, they went together to King Darius. The king was holding court, sitting on his throne, attending to the various matters of state. The officials approached, bowed low, and spoke in voices that managed to sound both respectful and triumphant. Your Majesty, they said, did you not sign a decree that for 30 days anyone who prays to any god or man except you would be thrown into the lion's den? The king nodded. I did sign such a decree, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. The officials exchanged glances. Then we must inform you, Your Majesty, that Daniel, one of your chief administrators, has paid no attention to your decree. 3 times a day he prays to his God. And with those words, the trap snapped shut. King Darius felt as though the ground had fallen away beneath him. His face went pale. His hands gripped the arms of his throne. Daniel. They were talking about Daniel, faithful, wise, irreplaceable Daniel. In that instant, the king understood. He saw the conspiracy for what it was. He saw how he had been manipulated, how his pride had been used against the one man who truly deserved his trust, and horror filled his heart. "No," he whispered, "no." But the officials stood firm, their faces arranged in false regret. "The law is the law, Your Majesty. Signed and sealed. It cannot be repealed." For the rest of that day, King Darius tried desperately to find a way out. He consulted with his wisest advisors. He searched through legal texts. He paced his chambers, his mind racing, looking for any loophole, any exception, any way to save Daniel. But there was none. The law of the Medes and Persians, once signed and sealed, was absolute. Even the king himself could not overturn it. He had trapped himself in his own pride, and now Daniel would pay the price. As the sun began to set, turning the sky orange and pink and gold, the officials returned. "Your Majesty," they said, "remember that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree the king issues can be changed." King Darius closed his eyes. His heart was breaking, but he was bound by his own law, trapped by his own decree. Slowly, with a voice heavy with grief, he gave the order. "Bring Daniel." They came for Daniel in the evening, as the last light was fading from the sky. He was in his chambers, just finishing his evening prayers, when the guards arrived at his door. He knew why they were there. He had known this moment was coming since the decree was announced. So when they entered, apologetic and sad, he simply nodded and stood. His knees were a bit stiff from kneeling, but his heart was steady, at peace. "I'm ready," he said quietly. They led him through the palace corridors, past tapestries and lamps, past other officials who watched with various expressions, some satisfied, some shocked, some deeply grieved. They led him out into the cooling evening air, down stone steps, through gates, toward the edge of the city where the lion's den waited. King Darius met them there. The king's face was drawn with anguish, his eyes red from tears he had tried to hide. When he saw Daniel, something broke in him. He rushed forward, grasping Daniel's hands in his own. "Daniel," the king said, his voice cracking, "may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Daniel looked into the king's face and smiled gently. "Even now, even here," he offered comfort. "Your Majesty has always been kind to me," he said. "Do not grieve. My God is able to deliver me. And if he chooses not to, then I will go to him. Either way, I am held by love. I am safe in ways that matter more than life itself." The king wanted to say more, wanted to argue, wanted to do something, but the officials were watching. The law was the law. And so, with tears streaming down his face, King Darius gave a nod to the guards. They led Daniel to the mouth of the den. It was a large cave carved into rock, with a small opening at the top. Inside, in the darkness below, the lions waited. Everyone could hear them, the rustle of movement, the low rumble of breathing, the occasional growl that echoed against stone. These were not tame creatures. They were hunters, kept hungry, powerful animals with teeth like daggers and claws that could tear flesh. Men thrown into this den rarely lasted more than a few moments. It was meant to be a swift but terrible death. Daniel looked down into the darkness. He couldn't see the bottom, couldn't see the lions clearly, but he could feel the cool air rising from below, smell the animal musk, hear the sounds of waiting beasts. And still, he was not afraid. Or if he was, his fear was smaller than his trust. His fear was held in the hands of something greater. The guards helped lower him into the den. There was a rope, rough against his palms, and he descended slowly into the darkness, his white hair gleaming in the torchlight for a moment before the shadows swallowed him. His feet touched the floor of the den, the rope was pulled up, and then a large stone was rolled across the opening, sealing him in with the lions. The king himself placed his seal on the stone, and the seals of his nobles beside it, so that no one could come in the night and rescue Daniel. What was done was done. There could be no reversal. In the sudden darkness, Daniel stood very still, letting his eyes adjust. Gradually, he'd make out shapes. The walls of the cave, rough and shadowed, the far corners where darkness pooled deepest. And there, Scattered around the den, the lions. There were several of them, large males with dark manes, lean females with calculating eyes. They stirred as he entered, lifting their heads, watching this new presence in their domain. Daniel's heart was beating fast now. He couldn't help it. These were powerful creatures, and he was an old man, defenseless and alone. But even as his body responded with natural fear, his spirit remained calm, because he was not really alone. He had never been alone. Slowly, carefully, Daniel sank down to his knees, not in terror, but in prayer. Just as he had knelt by his window 3 times a day for decades, now he knelt in the lion's den. And in a soft voice that trembled only slightly, he began to pray. "My God," he whispered, "my rock and my salvation. You have been with me since I was a boy in Jerusalem. You were with me on the long road to Babylon. You have been with me through all the years of my life, and you are with me now. Here in this darkness, here in this place of fear, you are here." And as he prayed, something extraordinary happened. The lions, which had been stirring and watching, began to settle. First one, then another, then all of them. They circled slowly, the way lions do, and then they lay down. Their great heads rested on their paws. Their eyes, which had been bright with predatory interest, grew soft and drowsy. It was as if a calm descended into that place, a peace that had nothing to do with the natural order of things, a presence that filled the den with safety. Daniel, still praying, felt it too. The fear drained away. The tension left his shoulders, and a warmth, gentle as sunlight, seemed to surround him even in the darkness. He couldn't see it with his eyes, but he knew. He knew with a certainty beyond sight. God had sent his angel, the same God who had shut the mouths of lions for his prophet long ago, the same God who had delivered Israel from Egypt, the same God who had promised never to leave nor forsake. That God was here. The angel was like a presence made of light and strength and infinite tenderness. Daniel couldn't see a form, couldn't point and say, "There." But he felt the protection like a wall around him, felt the love like arms holding him close, felt the peace like a lullaby sung over a frightened child. The lions were harmless now. More than harmless. They were almost gentle. One of the great males, a magnificent creature with a mane like bronze, even crawled closer to Daniel and laid down near his feet, letting out a contented sigh. Daniel, almost laughing now with relief and joy, reached out a tentative hand and touched the lion's mane. It was thick and warm. The lion's breathing was slow and even, peaceful, protected. "Thank you," Daniel whispered. "Thank you, my God." Above, beyond the sealed stone, night had fallen fully. The moon rose, a silver disk climbing into the star-scattered sky. The city of Babylon grew quiet as people retired to their homes. And in the palace, King Darius paced his chambers, unable to eat, unable to sleep, tormented by what he had done. But in the den below, Daniel rested. He sat with his back against the cool stone wall. The lions slept around him like large cats, their breathing a soft susurration in the darkness. And Daniel, so tired, so very tired, let his own eyes close. He thought of his mother, teaching him prayers in the sunlit courtyard of his childhood home. He thought of the long road to Babylon and how God had been with him every step. He thought of the window where he had prayed for so many years, facing toward Jerusalem, toward home. And as he sat there in the darkness, surrounded by sleeping lions, held by the presence of God, Daniel felt something he hadn't expected to feel. He felt loved, deeply, perfectly, completely loved. Not loved because he had been faithful, though he had been. Not loved because he was good, though he had tried to be. But loved simply because he was. Loved the way a father loves a child. Loved the way the shepherd loves every single sheep. A tear slid down his weathered cheek. But it was a tear of gratitude, of wonder, of something too deep for words. The night passed slowly, gently. Outside, the moon crossed the sky, casting silver shadows. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. And in the lion's den, Daniel slept in the presence of his God, safe and deeply peaceful, as the lions lay around him like a living wall of protection. It was, perhaps, the most restful night of his entire life. King Darius did not sleep. He paced through the night, wearing tracks in the carpet of his chamber. He refused food when servants brought it. He refused wine. He refused the musicians who came to soothe him. Nothing could comfort him. He had condemned the best man in his kingdom to death, and the knowledge sat in his chest like a stone. As soon as the first gray light of dawn touched the sky, before the sun had even crested the horizon, the king was up and moving. He called for his guards, threw on his robes, and hurried through the palace corridors toward the lion's den. His heart was pounding. He knew logically that Daniel must be dead. No one survived a night with the lions, but some small part of him, some desperate hope, pushed him to run faster through the awakening city. He reached the den just as the sun broke over the eastern horizon, flooding the world with golden light. The stone was still sealed. The guards were still posted. Everything was as he had left it. But the king rushed to the opening and shouted down into the darkness, his voice breaking with grief and hope mixed together. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" There was a moment of silence. The guards held their breath. The world seemed to pause. And then, from deep in the den, a voice, strong and clear and filled with quiet joy. "O King, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king let out a cry of relief and joy so loud that it echoed across the city. "Bring him up! Bring him up at once!" The guards scrambled to roll away the stone, to lower ropes into the den. And as the morning light streamed into that dark place for the first time, they saw an impossible sight. Daniel stood in the center of the den, his white hair gleaming, his face peaceful. And around him, lying calmly, were the lions. They didn't attack. They didn't even stir much. They simply lay there, like great cats lounging in the sun. The guards helped Daniel climb up, hauling him carefully hand over hand until he emerged into the morning air. And when his feet touched the ground outside the den, King Darius embraced him, this mighty king holding this faithful servant, both of them weeping with relief and joy. "Not a scratch," one of the guards whispered in amazement. "Look, not a scratch on him." It was true. Daniel's robes were dusty from the floor of the den, but his skin was unmarked. No bites, no scratches, no wounds of any kind. He looked, if anything, more rested than he had in years. There was a peace in his eyes, a lightness in his bearing, as if he had spent the night in the most wonderful place. The king held him at arm's length, looking at him in wonder. "Your God," he said slowly. "Your God is truly the living God." Daniel smiled. "He has always been faithful," he said simply. "In every season, in every place, even in the darkness of the lion's den." By now, people were gathering. Word had spread through the city like wildfire. Daniel was alive. Daniel had survived the lions. Crowds pressed close, wanting to see, wanting to understand this miracle. And King Darius, standing there in the growing morning light, made a decision. He turned to his scribes who had followed him from the palace. "Write this down," he commanded. "Write it and send it to every nation, to every province in the kingdom." And this is what he proclaimed. "I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." It was a powerful proclamation, a king acknowledging the sovereignty of a greater king, a ruler bowing to the God who rules over all. As for the officials who had conspired against Daniel, the king's justice was swift. When he learned of their plot, of how they had used his pride to manipulate him into condemning an innocent man, His anger was fierce. Those men and their families were brought to the very den where they had sent Daniel, but no angel came to save them. The lions, no longer held back by divine protection, did what lions do. It was a harsh justice, but in that ancient time, in that culture of law and consequence, it was the justice that came. Daniel, hearing of it later, felt no satisfaction, only sadness. Sadness that jealousy and pride had led men to such darkness, sadness that families had suffered, sadness that the human heart could be so twisted. But he also felt gratitude. Gratitude that God had saved him, not just from the lions, but for more years of service, more years of faithfulness, more years of kneeling by his window and praying toward home. That evening, as the sun set over Babylon once again, Daniel returned to his chambers. He walked slowly to his window, the window that had never closed, the window that had been the cause of all this trouble and all this deliverance. He knelt in his familiar spot, his old knees finding the worn places in the stone floor. And as the golden light faded to purple and then to deep blue, Daniel prayed. He gave thanks for another day. He gave thanks for God's faithfulness. He gave thanks for a king who had learned to honor the living God. And he prayed, as he always did, for his people, for Jerusalem, for the day when exile would end and they would all go home. And as he prayed, a cool evening breeze stirred the curtains, carrying with it the scents of the city, the sounds of life continuing, the endless rhythm of days turning into nights, turning into days again. Daniel's voice was soft in the dimming light, but it was sure, steady, unshaken. He had walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and he had feared no evil, for God had been with him. God's rod and staff had comforted him. A table had been prepared for him in the presence of his enemies, or in the presence of lions. It was much the same. And surely, goodness and mercy would follow him all the days of his life. And now, dear friend, our story is drawing to a close, like daylight fading into the gentleness of evening. But before we part ways, before you drift off into sleep's tender arms, let's sit together for just a little longer. Let's breathe in the truth of this story. Let it settle into your bones like warmth, like peace, like love. Daniel's story is, in so many ways, our story too. Not because we'll face lions, but because we all face fears. We all walk through times when we feel alone, when the darkness presses close, when we wonder if we'll make it through the night. And this story whispers to us across the centuries. You are not alone. You have never been alone. The same God who sent his angel into the lion's den, who closed the mouths of hungry beasts, who held Daniel through that long, dark night, that God is with you too. Right now, in this moment, as you lie in your bed with the weight of the day finally lifting away, as your breathing slows and your muscles relax, as the concerns of tomorrow fade into the background, God is near, closer than your breath, more constant than your heartbeat. You don't have to be as faithful as Daniel to be loved by God. You don't have to pray 3 times a day or interpret dreams or serve in palaces. You don't have to be perfect or extraordinary or even particularly good. You simply have to be you, tired, human, beautiful you. And that is enough. That has always been enough. Like Daniel, you have walked a long road. Perhaps you too have felt exiled from home, from the place where you felt safest, from the life you thought you'd have. Perhaps you've had to adapt to new circumstances, to learn new ways, to find faith in foreign lands. And like Daniel, you have done your best. You have tried to be faithful with what you've been given. You have prayed when you could, trusted when it was hard, kept going even when you were tired. And just like Daniel, you are seen. You are known. You are held by a love that will never let you go. So let yourself rest now. Really rest. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands unfold. You have done enough today. You have been enough today. You are enough. Imagine, if you will, that you are in that den with Daniel. But there's no fear here, only peace. The lions are sleeping, gentle as lambs. The angel's presence is like a warm blanket wrapped around you. And God himself is near, so near you can almost feel the whisper of breath, the tender touch of infinite care. You are safe here, completely safe, not because nothing can hurt you in this world, but because you are held by something stronger than any fear, any danger, any darkness. Let that truth sink deep into your spirit as you prepare for sleep. Your breathing is slowing now, becoming deeper, more even, in and out, like waves on a gentle shore, like the tide of peace washing over you again and again. With each breath, you are letting go a little more, letting go of control, letting go of worry, letting go of the need to figure everything out right now. You are releasing it all into hands that are stronger and more tender than you can imagine. God's got this. God's got you, just like he had Daniel. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow will take care of itself. Tomorrow will have its own grace, its own provision, its own mercy. But tonight is for rest, for peace, for sleep. Think of Daniel lying against that cool stone wall, surrounded by lions that had become gentle as house cats. Think of how tired he must have been, the exhaustion of a long life faithfully lived, the weariness that comes from years of service. And think of how, in that most unlikely place, he found the deepest rest he had ever known, because he finally, fully, completely let go and trusted. You can do that too, right now, in your own lion's den, whatever that looks like for you. You can trust. You can rest. You can let the angel of God's presence stand guard while you sleep. The night is gentle around you. The darkness is not empty. It's full of peace, full of angels you cannot see, full of a love that never sleeps, never forgets, never abandons. You are Daniel, kneeling by your window, praying toward home. You are Daniel, facing the den with quiet courage. You are Daniel, surrounded by sleeping lions. You are Daniel, delivered at dawn. But more than that, you are yourself, beloved, known, held. And as you close your eyes now, as you feel yourself drifting toward sleep, know that you are drifting toward love, toward peace, toward the arms that have always been reaching for you. God is whispering over you even now. Do not fear. I am with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Sleep now, dear child. Sleep and rest. I am watching over you. I am here. The window is open, and cool air drifts in, carrying with it the sense of night, the peace of stars, the promise of morning. Your body is growing heavy now, sinking deeper into the mattress, letting go, letting go, letting go. And in this space between waking and sleeping, you are held, perfectly held, completely safe, deeply loved. The lions are sleeping, the angel is near, God is here. And you, dear one, you can rest now. Rest in the presence of the one who shut the mouths of lions. Rest in the arms of the one who never lets go. Rest in the love that has been faithful to you all of your days and will be faithful still. The night is gentle, the darkness is kind, and you are safe. So very, very safe. Sleep now, beloved. Sleep in peace. Sleep in the presence of God. Just like Daniel in the lion's den, you are not alone. You have never been alone. You will never be alone. God is here. God is here. God is here. Rest now, rest, rest. Amen.